At the Cambridge Primate Research Center, one ape is tied tightly to a bed and forced to watch endless violent videos showing humans hurting each other. In the middle of the night, 3 animal rights activists sneak into the lab. They want to save the poor animals from their suffering. But before they can open any cages, they run into a frightened lab worker. The worker quickly warns them that the apes are not normal. They are infected with a dangerous rage virus. He begs them not to release the animals, saying it could destroy everything. But the activists refuse to listen. One of them unlocks a cage. The ape lunges at her. Within seconds, she begins to spit blood. She attacks the others without control. Just like that, the deadly virus begins to spread. 28 days later, in a quiet London hospital, a man named Jim wakes up in the ICU. He is completely naked, lying weakly on a bed. The room is eerily silent. No doctors, no nurses. Slowly, he removes the tubes from his body and limps out into the hallway. His body is still weak from whatever accident he had. The hospital is strangely empty. Phones don't work, and when Jim shouts for help, he finds a vending machine, drinks a can of soda, and grabs some snacks. Then, nervously, he steps outside. What he sees shocks him. The streets are silent, empty of life. London feels like a ghost town. Buses are flipped over, trash is everywhere, and money lies scattered on the ground. Jim picks up some cash, puzzled, as if it still matters. Walking further, he finds a newspaper lying on the street. The headlines talk about people fleeing Britain and the world being thrown into chaos. But the exact reason is unclear. Still confused, Jim wanders into a church. Inside, he finds piles of corpses. The air is heavy and silent. Suddenly, he hears a sound. A priest appears, stumbling forward in a strange, jerky way. His movements are unnatural, his face twisted. Terrified, Jim realizes something is wrong and runs out of the building. More infected bodies around him begin to twitch and rise. At the very last second, 2 strangers rescue him with firebombs. They are a man named Mark and a woman named Selena. They take Jim to a safe hiding place. There, they ask who he is and why he's wearing only a hospital gown. Jim explains that he worked as a courier, had an accident, and had been unconscious until today. He woke up in the hospital with no idea of what happened. Selena and Mark explain that a virus has spread through blood, turning people into violent monsters like zombies. London has collapsed, the government is gone, and even big cities like New York and Paris have also been destroyed. Seeing Jim alive and uninfected is a miracle for them. Jim's first thought is of his parents. He wants to know if they are safe. Selena warns him that they are probably gone, but Jim refuses to believe it and insists on going home. The next morning, Selena and Mark agree to go with him. Sadly, when Jim arrives, he finds his parents lying in bed, having taken pills to end their lives before infection could reach them. His mother is holding a childhood photo of him, with a farewell note written on the back. With endless love, Jim. Jim bursts into tears. Mark tells him that at least his parents died peacefully, unlike many others who turned into monsters. That night, the 3 stay at Jim's house. Jim cannot sleep. He watches old family videos on the TV, remembering better days when everything was normal. But the light from the candle draws nearby zombies. Suddenly, they attack. Mark and Selena fight bravely, but Jim freezes in fear. To his horror, but then they see blood on Mark's arm. Selena doesn't hesitate. She immediately kills him with her knife before he turns. Jim is shocked, but Selena explains that once someone is infected, you have less than 20 seconds before they change. She tells Jim that if it had been him, she would have done the same. In this world, survival is all that matters. Now only Jim and Selena remain together. On the road, they notice flashing lights in the distance, coming from a tall apartment building. Hoping for survivors, they climb over shopping carts blocking the entrance. They find no power or running water, so they have to climb the stairs in the dark. As zombies begin to follow them up, Jim struggles to keep up with Selena. Just when it seems they are about to be caught, a man dressed in black protective gear with a shield appears. He skillfully defeats the zombies and leads them to safety. The man is Frank, and he lives there with his teenage daughter, Hannah. Frank is warm and welcoming, offering them a drink of wine that his late wife had made. Hannah is more cautious around strangers, but her father's kindness is clear. That night, after Frank and Hannah go to sleep, Selena whispers to Jim. She warns him that although Frank and Hannah seem nice, people like them could slow them down. In times like these, she says survival must come before everything else, even kindness. Jim disagrees quietly, but still thanks Selena for saving his life earlier. The next morning, Frank explains their biggest problem, water. It was cut off weeks ago. They cannot wash, and they use buckets as toilets, emptying them off the balcony each morning. Frank has tried to collect rainwater on the roof, but hasn't rained for 10 days. If they stay, they will die of thirst before the zombies even get to them. Frank then shares a piece of hope. He heard a radio broadcast from soldiers, saying they had a safe zone about 27 miles northeast of Manchester. They claimed to have discovered something about the infection and were protecting survivors there. Frank believes they should go. Selena doubts it, thinking the soldiers may already be dead, but Hannah insists they take the chance. She says that either way, they will die if they do nothing. Frank has a car with a full tank, so the four set off together. On the way, they reach a tunnel blocked by wrecked cars. Frank drives straight over them, and everyone laughs nervously in relief. But then the car gets a flat tire. In the dark tunnel, they rush to change it. Suddenly, hundreds of rats run past them, fleeing from something. Then zombies appear. With no time left, the four of them lift the car by hand and change the tire just in time to escape. Later, they stop at a supermarket to gather supplies. They grab food, medicine, and other essentials. Frank happily picks up expensive bottles of wine he could never afford before. At the checkout, he even leaves his credit card behind, joking that money is useless now. When they stop for fuel at a gas station, Jim wanders into a burger shop and finds it filled with dead bodies. Among them is a mother holding her baby. Suddenly, a zombie child attacks him. Jim fights back and kills it. He is shaken deeply. He doesn't tell anyone about it, keeping it inside his heart. As they drive out of the city and into the countryside, the world feels peaceful again. They eat together on the grass, watch four wild horses run freely, and for a moment, they feel like a real family. Selena, who was once cold and focused only on survival, begins to change. Seeing Frank's love for his daughter makes her realize that human connections and love are just as important as survival. She quietly tells Jim that she was wrong before. Jim forgives her, smiling softly. That night, Frank stays awake to guard while the others sleep. Jim has a nightmare that he wakes up and finds everyone gone. He tosses and turns, frowning in his sleep. Frank gently wakes him, telling him it's just a bad dream and reassuring him like a caring father. For the first time since the outbreak, Jim feels a small sense of comfort. Then Jim, Selena, Frank, and Hannah set out again, hoping the soldiers' safe zone will be their salvation. After hours of travel, they finally arrive at Manchester. But instead of safety, they find the entire city in ruins, engulfed in fire and smoke. The broadcast that promised rescue was a lie. The location is completely empty. Frank, who had held on a hope for so long, refuses to accept this harsh reality. He searches frantically, calling out for soldiers, convinced they must still be nearby. Annoyed, Frank angrily kicks at the iron gate to scare it away. But in that moment, a single drop of infected blood drips down from above and lands right in his eye. Frank immediately realizes what has happened. He knows he is doomed. His body begins to shake and convulse as the infection takes hold. Before Jim can act, several gunshots ring out. Soldiers emerge from the grass with guns raised. They warn the group to stay back from Frank's body, then escort Jim, Selena, and Hannah to their hidden base. At first, the base seems secure. A colonel greets them warmly, promising clean sheets, hot showers, food, and, most importantly, safety. The place is surrounded by barbed wire, traps, and landmines. But Hannah is devastated by her father's death. Selena tries to comfort her, but later breaks down in tears herself. Jim, trying to be strong, holds her and gently kisses her. Later, Jim wanders around the base. The colonel shows him something disturbing. A soldier named Mailer, chained in a yard. 2 days ago, he was their comrade. Now he's an infected monster. The soldiers keep him alive to study the virus, watching how long it takes to die and how infection changes the body. That night, the group eats with the soldiers. The meal is better than anything they've had in weeks. Ham, beans, peas, and fried eggs, even if the smell is awful. But the atmosphere is tense. The soldiers make crude jokes and talk about the infection with despair. One soldier, nicknamed Tiger, is kinder than the others. He believes the virus is simply nature taking back control, reminding humanity that nothing lasts forever. The colonel, however, rejects this talk. In his mind, the world was violent before the virus. Suddenly, alarms go off. Zombies have reached the base. The soldiers grab their weapons. They quickly kill the attackers and return, treating it like just another night. But the real danger comes not from zombies, but from the soldiers themselves. One of them, Mickey, begins harassing Selena, bragging and taunting her. Others join in, their comments making Selena uneasy. Jim tries to defend her, but is quickly overpowered. Just before things spiral out of control, the colonel steps in to stop them. Jim seizes the chance to demand that he, Selena, and Hannah be allowed to leave. The colonel then reveals the horrifying truth. The broadcast wasn't about rescue. It was bait. The soldiers had been on the verge of losing hope. To stop them from giving up or killing themselves, the colonel promised them women. He lured survivors here so his men could rebuild civilization by force. The claim about finding the cause of infection was a lie. Jim rushes to warn Selena and Hannah, but before they can escape, soldiers knock him unconscious. Only Tiger speaks up in protest, but he is outnumbered and beaten down. He and Jim are locked up together. Furious, Tiger says the colonel's plan is nonsense. How could an infection spread across oceans and mountains? Maybe people in other parts of the world are still alive, living normally. But the colonel doesn't care. Soon, 2 soldiers drag Tiger and Jim deep into the woods. Rotting bodies litter the ground, proof that others before them had tried to resist. Knowing he's about to die, Tiger curses at them one last time. He's immediately shot dead. As the soldiers argue, Jim manages to slip away into the trees. They chase him, but when they can't find him, they assume he's as good as dead outside the base. Exhausted, Jim falls face first into the grass, lying flat to rest. Just then, a plane flies across the sky. Back at the base, things turn darker. Soldiers surround Selena and Hannah, forcing them to dress up in red gowns left behind by the house's previous owners. Selena, knowing resistance is useless for now, pretends to comply. She only requests that she and Hannah change privately. Once alone, Selena gives Hannah her sleeping pills to make her unconscious, hoping it will spare her from trauma. The soldiers outside think they're attempting suicide and burst in to stop them. Suddenly, alarms sound again. Chaos erupts. Jim has returned, creating havoc in the compound. Heavy rain pours down as the colonel leads men out to find him. Jim uses the storm to his advantage, disabling their vehicles and picking off soldiers one by one. While they're distracted, Jim sneaks back inside. To create even more chaos, Jim releases Mailer, the chained infected soldier. Lightning flashes as Mailer attacks, quickly spreading panic among the men. Meanwhile, Hannah escapes to her room during the confusion. Searching her clothes, she finds an old photo of her and her mother tucked in the pocket. Suddenly, a shadow moves on the wall. A zombie is inside. Hannah hides behind a mirror, trembling with fear. The infected lingers, confused by its reflection, before finally moving away. Only Mickey remains uninfected. Still obsessed with Selena, he fantasizes about being her savior. But before he can act, Jim drops from the roof above, taking him by surprise. Jim brutally gouges out his eye with his fingers, his rage terrifying. Selena, seeing his violent frenzy, believes Jim is infected and raises her knife to kill him. But when light falls on his face, she sees his eyes are clear. Jim is still human. Relieved, she drops the knife and kisses him. Hannah, watching, nervously asks if he had been biting Selena. Jim reassures her, and the three of them hold hands before making their escape. They find the colonel waiting inside with a gun. He shoots Jim in the stomach, swearing revenge for his dead man. But Hannah suddenly floors the car in reverse, slamming the colonel through the gate and leaving him to the zombies. Together, the three survivors escape into the night. 28 days later, bright sunshine fills a quiet countryside cottage. Jim wakes up in bed, bandaged but alive. Outside, Selena cuts up the red dress into strips of fabric, arranging them on the grass to spell out a giant hello. Hannah runs out to join her. Suddenly, a plane swoops overhead. All three wave desperately, hoping to be seen. Selena asks, "Do you think they saw us this time?" Hope glimmers in their eyes.